Are we doing this right?
Kakank, kakank.
Hey, it worked.
Kakank, kakank.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite Wednesday night live stream with expert cartoonists talking all about everything we love: comics, conventions, drawing.
Drawing, yes, lots of drawing.
JAMAR Nicholas is on assignment tonight, so we have picking up the slack is myself and the magnificent Mike Manley. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. It's on Webtoons and Tapas and Go Comics. And Mr. Mike Manley, what are you working on?
Today I was actually working on the Phantom, but then tomorrow I'll be working on Judge Parker. And those keep me occupied for a good part of each week.
Is that I messed up there. I'm still getting the hang of the back end here. Do you have set days? You're like, okay, this is a Judge Parker day. This is a Phantom day.
Usually the Phantom ended up being over the weekend, and then Judge Parker ended up being during the week. But like I will be finishing the Phantom tonight, but also starting the Sunday for Judge Parker. So it's just rolling, constantly rolling. It doesn't matter, As soon as you're done with one, then you have to do the other, and some of it has to do with the schedule of my assistant. Like Liang is actually leaving tomorrow to go to the Denver Comic-Con.
Oh wow!
So what I try to do is work so that I have stuff to send her before or after she comes back from the convention. So
great. Well, all these conventions that are happening is what kind of kicked off this discussion. We were thinking about, well, what's this week's topic? And I just got back from Heroes Con. I had a great time there. And Liang's going to Denver. Jamar is on the road. Baltimore and San Diego are on everybody's radar, in New York.
Right.
And so we were talking about
the big three from Midsummer, and then I guess Baltimore's the last one, right?
Usually, I think New York's after Baltimore this year. Baltimore's the second weekend of September.
Yeah.
And
then wasn't there someone in Ohio? It was around Thanksgiving.
That was Mid-Ohio, way back in the day. That was kind of the year-end one. It was always Thanksgiving weekend. Yeah, that was a great show. It was a really fun, weird show. But that's something we want to get into about these different conventions, is that each convention has its own character, and that each one sort of expects different things of you, and the audience goes there for different reasons. And we can get into some of that. But I want to give a little convention report for Heroes Con. I kind of went into it swamped with work, didn't have much time. I mean, I was totally prepared ahead of time. It was the most prepared show I'd been going to. Everything was packed up. I mean, even like toiletries, everything. And I'm just sitting at my desk working and sending files out to clients and stuff like that. So I hit the road, get to Heroes Con. And I'm almost thinking like, maybe I can't go. I've got all this work to do. And I had such a great time. The show that Shelton and Carla put on, and the volunteers and staff there, is an amazing show. It's an art show. It's a show where commissions and sketches and original art are at a premium. It's great. They love comic books. There's all the toys and back issues and other tchotchkes and merch. But for the most part, as cartoonists, it's a great show. I mean, your head's down all weekend drawing, doing commissions and things like that. But I left it invigorated. I'm like, I don't care what's on my plate. I have to go to Heroes Con next year. I have to go to Baltimore. I think of those things as kind of sibling shows. They're both they have their own character, but they're both very much comic book and art friendly.
Yeah, I think both of those shows. I haven't done Heroes in a long time, but I would say they're more about comics and less about everything else, right? Like comics is forefront, not multimedia companies and Hall H and everything like in San Diego.
Yeah.
Of course, seems like it might not be happening this year in the way that it was happening for a couple decades now. And so I really liked those shows because also it's easy to talk to artists and writers and creators at those shows, where at a big show like San Diego or even New York, everybody is so stressed out by the size and the complexity
Right.
and the logistics of San Diego are exhausting.
Yeah, it's those shows are. I mean, San Diego is just such a beast unto itself. But what I like about Baltimore and Heroes, and you can tell you talk about the comic book character of it, is that they're both owned by comic book store retailers. I mean, Shelton has Heroes Aren't Hard to Find, and Mark Nathan has Cards, Comics, and Collectibles. And you can tell that they love comics, that they read these comics, and so their guest choices aren't always. They're not media first. They're comic guests. Like, they want to get the artist of whoever's drawing Batman, and like they know who's drawing Batman. I mean, if you ask the people who are running the other shows, they might not know.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And even if you have drawn Batman, they may not know you. So
are you speaking from experience, Mike?
I'm speaking from experience. So if the show is run by a corporation whose job it is to put on fantasy shows, right? Just a general fantasy show. Your experience as an artist, which is really what we're talking about tonight on the podcast, is your experience as an artist and what you sort of expect out of a show. Why are you going to the show? What do you need from a show? And that's going to really require you to do a little bit of logistics depending upon the kind of show. And we were just talking before we went on about, we've been going to cons a long time, me longer than Steve. I think the first comic convention I went to was in Novi, Michigan, I believe. And at that show, there was like a whole contingent of Detroit-based comic artists like Terry Austin, Al Milgram,
wow,
Mike Vosberg, Walt Simonson was there.
Did you say what year this is?
This is probably 77.
Oh my goodness.
So,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Walt had just finished. So for those of you at home with your Google, Walt had just finished doing the last Cylon story for Battlestar Galactica.
Wow.
And it was and like they were all lined up at a little row of tables right there, and you could go up and down and talk to everybody. It was a very small show, very personable. I remember really clicking a lot with Walt. I actually wrote my only fan letter to an artist.
Really?
To Walt. No, I take that back. I did write a fan letter to Leonard Starr. I don't know if we got it, but I wrote a fan letter to Walt after that. And he still has it supposedly and threatens someday to publish it and embarrass me. So
fantastic. That's great. So when was let's talk about what was your first convention that you went to as a cartoonist? And so you've been going to conventions for a while. You had a sense of what they were like. What was the first one you were at as a person behind the table, or maybe even as a person bringing your portfolio around?
Well, that would probably be I had my samples then when I went to see those guys at that show. I had some Fantastic Four samples that were very sort of Jack Kirby-esque. And I remember getting a lot of feedback like, well, you should try to do your own thing. Walt was very good. He he gave me a lot of very usable feedback, right? Because there's sort of the generic, oh, you need to work on your head, your anatomy, your storytelling, whatever, Now, and I would actually take notes.
Right.
I would take little notes. And then what I would do when I was back home is I would take a piece of tape and I would write on the piece of tape those points and stick those up. So those would be, okay, that's like, that's the thing I have to work on. And then I think another show I went to, I saw Keith Pollard. That was somewhere in Michigan. I'm not sure. It might have been, there was a lot of shows around the Flint, Novi, Southfield, like right outside of the city of Detroit in the suburbs. And then so I always had samples and I would work up samples. I'd figure like the local comic book store, the Ivagamotto, always had ads for like, oh, there'll be a show here in April, blah, 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 right? And so that would be like my target to have another set of samples to go to the convention, right? And I would have a stapled set of samples with my name and my address, on them, so I could give them to the person.
That's great. So you brought like a multiple sets of these to hand to people? That's
Yes.
excellent. That's excellent. What gave you what made you think to do that?
I'm not sure if I read it somewhere, but if you're going to a show and there's going to be people there, you want to be able to give them
that's
copies of your work, right?
I bet that's still sound advice. I mean, if someone wants to hand you a QR code, even that's too much work for most people to go check things out, right?
Right. Well, when you go to a show now, everybody's giving you stuff. The bigger the show, the more stuff people give you, right? People are giving you cards and postcards and, oh, it's my comic. And, then like me, you get back home and you just got like all this stuff. You sort of look through it. Some of the stuff you keep. A lot of the stuff just gets shuffled through and like you have your debris pile of things that eventually, like, oh yeah, look at this. What's that? Oh, that's from, whatever,
Right.
I mean, the whole thing is so completely different now because it was all personal. There was no internet. There really wasn't even letters, letters were how people, dear Mr. Simonson,
Dear Mr. Simonson. It's like
right.
By candlelight in your one part.
Exactly. With my little feathered quill, and so my expectation as a young up and coming artist was to go to a convention, show people my samples, get work, but at least if I didn't get work, I would get feedback that I would then hopefully be able to use to improve my samples to get more work, and to eventually get work. And so I think it was at the 1983 Chicago Con where I was showing my stuff, and I had two sets of samples. I had my Trax Rover funny animal thing, and then I had Batman samples. Nobody really liked the Batman samples, but a lot of people really liked the Trax Rover samples, the sort of animated looking stuff. And that led to me getting a job helping out Judy Hunt. And she was doing a book for DC, which had robots in it. And my Space Dog story had a robot in it. So that led me to working with her.
Sure.
And which then gave me samples to show to Marvel. And of course, Marvel looks at the samples of the robot stuff and goes, oh, here, do the Transformers, right? That's not what I wanted to do, but again, when you're starting out, you take any opportunity. So I still think, despite everything being high tech and the future, if you're going to a show, it's a good idea to have sort of a battle plan. If, and, again, things are also even different within the last couple of years, because it used to be you would go to a show and there would be editors, because the editors would be the artists might say, hey, I like your stuff. Go talk to that editor. Tell them I sent you, right? You don't get the editors at the Marvel booth or the DC booth. Many of the companies don't have booths anymore. So, but again, it's still, even though there's social media and everything, you're still going around, you're taking your opportunity to put
right
face to face, meeting people.
So in that case, you're talking about a person who's going there probably as an attendee, or at least that's one of the tracks, one of the reasons they're going to be there. Because I guess you could imagine that you're a person who wants to work for a big publisher, and so you're going to bring your portfolio and your business cards and your samples, and you're going to go and try to meet editors and network. Then there's the other group of people who are going to go there and want to set up as artists, right? There's the kind of two different tracks, and people in Group B could also be there showing their portfolio while they're at it, right?
Right.
But
and then there's group AAA, which is the company sends you to the show, or you're, a major artist working in the business, and you go to the show and you're going to promote, if the company sends you, you're promoting what you're doing for the company.
Right.
Or you're going and you're promoting your stuff, which is that's where I am. When I go to a show, I'm promoting myself, because the companies don't promote me. Right. And if I don't promote myself, no one will promote me. Right. They might promote you that month when your drawing something is coming out. But so I go to promote myself, which is different than when I would go and would be an artist alley. So there's like levels of
right
promotion, right? And with each level of promotion or each level of attendance, what is your expectation? Like, some guys just want to break even. Some people do this now as a way to make a living. I mean, they're like road warriors. They're at like 3 conventions a month. They touch down Monday, recover a day or two, wheels up Thursday,
Yeah, I know quite a few cartoonists I know who like that. It's a healthy. They turned it into a healthy career of just going, packing up their stuff, going convention to convention. Absolutely. It's interesting that that's one model, because I think one of the things I think of most important before setting up at a convention. First of all, setting up a convention, if you haven't done it before, I would suggest going and visiting the convention first to see if it's the kind of convention that suits you. I've had a friend who was setting up, they had very particular kind of art, and they set up at this garden show, and it was like, they thought, okay, it's going to be art for photography and things like that. It was going to pretty much, but it wasn't that kind of show. Their work wasn't appropriate for that show. So it kind of was a bust. And it was because they weren't appropriate. And I felt that way when I first went to some conventions that have a kind of a more heavy metal artwork feel, not Heavy Metal the magazine, but like tattoo art, that kind of thing, much more skulls and vipers and stuff. And you go there with a kind of lighthearted kids comic, and you're not going to fit in. It's not going to be, you might find a few people, but it's one of those things where it's you're showing your Christmas movie on the Spike TV network, or you're showing there's your Spike movie on the Lifetime channel. It's just your people aren't there.
And I was hoping to get Liang on tonight, but she's not feeling well. But it's also different if you're going and you're selling, like she's doing more anime, manga stuff. And what kind of show is it? Because there's shows. We're in the time now where there's shows just for manga and anime, just for comics, just for autographs, just for cosplay. I mean, we've really sliced the apple into a lot of different pieces now, and you find out like, well, if I go to this show, a big show, and I'm one of 75 people in Artist Alley, and 65 of them are doing fan art, how do I make a living? How do I make my money back? How do I make my table fee back?
Well, that was sort of me acclimating to Heroes Con. If I go there with just my comics and not artwork, it's a tougher weekend to make your money back for your travel expenses and your expenses in general. So it's a thing where, oh, I'm going to create more artwork ahead of time. I'm going to create more sketches and things like that to have at my table. And I had a much better convention because of that. It was not a case where I don't think I was going to be able to bend the convention to just like the thing that I'm bringing. You know, you have to, what are people there for, and cater to that. So if you're willing to compromise that way, I mean, if you view it as a compromise, you know, I'm willing to, again, I think I mentioned last week's episode, I just want to make money drawing pictures.
Right.
I make a living drawing pictures. So
right. But
setting up at the convention, I just drew Greedo, and someone's like, oh, a Greedo drawing, you know?
Right. But the thing is that what I noticed is that, you know, I came up from when there were not that many conventions to where there's like the old style conventions where it's mostly just artists, old comics, you know, people coming up with stuff to get signed and pull lists to complete their convention, their collections. But now, if you go to San Diego and there's 200,000 people, 190,000 are not there for comics. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I learned from doing the wizard shows, which is one of the reasons why I stopped doing it, is that I would go there and I would spend the weekend. But the people coming in are, you know, they want to get an autograph. It costs so much to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And they want an autograph. If you want 2 or 3 autographs from your favorite voice actor, favorite actor, you know, sit next to the guy, like Weekend at Bernie's, you know, they were not interested in what I was doing. Right?
I did a wizard show Philadelphia, and I was there. I had this idea in 2004 that I'm going to give comics away. I'm going to make comics. Maybe I had the shows where I didn't have enough sales. Well, I'm just going to give these things away. And so what I did was I sold ads in my comics. I reached out to vendors who were at the convention and said, hey, I'm going to be handing out these comics. I'm going to give away 5,000 comics at this show. Do you want to buy an ad in it? I'll include your booth number. Basically an ad for that room, and that we're handing it out in. And it worked out really well. The various advertisers paid for my print run, but it meant me standing largely near the doorway of the hall. You can't do this at San Diego. They got rules. But at the Wizards Philly, I was just there with a small handful of books. As people walked in, I was handing them to them. And a couple of people were like, it broke my heart, was like, I don't read comics. I'm like, you're coming into a Comic-Con. They said it to my face. I don't read comics.
But you can get a slice of pizza for $1 with this comic. You know?
Yeah, really. It's like,
yeah. So I think, you know, people get disappointed when they spend all that money and time and investment to go to a convention, and then the result is, you know, like a cartoon of you drawing of you pulling your pockets out and a little fly flies away, or a moth or something, right? And I think we're really at a time where you have to, because there's so many conventions and so many artists trying to get in. I mean, I know both Liang and Mimi have tried to get in the last year, several conventions now, and they can't get in. They get waitlisted. People get waitlisted now. Nobody used to get waitlisted. You wanted to be on Artist Alley, you just pay the $300 or whatever, get your table. Yeah. But now all these shows are so packed with people trying to get in that you get waitlisted. So again, part of the planning that goes into that is, if you're promoting yourself and your own IP, or you're promoting yourself in the IP of Marvel or DC or Dark Horse or some publisher? Or are you there as an independent artist? And are you promoting your IP? Or are you there as an independent artist, but a fan artist producing fan art?
Right.
And then you have to spend the time figuring out, because I've talked to them. Well, okay, what's the new season of anime that's coming out? And what are the new shows? So I need to draw those popular characters.
Sure.
So I will have prints and things of those popular characters.
2019 Artist Alley was full of Baby Yodas.
Yeah. Right, exactly. But and that can work for you. But the downside of that in the long run is that fan art is not your own IP. And if later on you wanted to do a book of your work, you wouldn't be able to do it because it's all fan art.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like short-term, long-term, short-term goal, long-term goal. All these things are connected, right?
Yeah.
If your goal is to get a job drawing for somebody else, it's different than if it is to go to a show to promote your own thing that you're drawing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, to me, I like doing the fan art at some shows because, well, it still brings people over, and the hope is that here's my postcard for my comic, and here's my mailing list, and like I build all my tables around my mailing list. So it's like whatever my table is, smack dab in the middle is a clipboard, pen. It's a quill pen. It's a ballpoint pen with a quill because it's middle age. It's cute, and it's a sign up sheet, and it's the only thing I absolutely need on my table. I'll sit behind a table with no pens, no pencils, nothing. If I have my sign up sheet, it can be a good convention, because if that's the beginning of a relationship with a new reader, that can be a person who becomes a Patreon supporter. That's a person who might support a future Kickstarter. It's the most important to me. It's the most important thing. I've set up at San Diego Comic-Con, probably most recently 2014, 2015, something like that. Shared a table with America's Tom Zoller, and it was super challenging to be at a show like that, because it was like trying to sell stuff on a New York City subway during rush hour. People just zipping past. They had places to be, and you're trying to get their attention for a fraction of a second. But one of the arguments for going there is that, you create these relationships. You could be discovered, all that stuff. I kind of feel like that's not for me. I feel like I'd much rather set up at 100 local shows. A show that's around the corner, that if it cost me $50 to set up, I can make $50 back, but, trying to spend $3,000 to go do some big city convention when you're not moving $3,000 worth of material.
Right. And I also think that for me, San Diego used to be two things, or maybe three. One, when I was self-publishing, it was a way of me promoting my books and giving my books out to people. Two, it was a way for me to meet people in California who I worked with in the animation business, right? Who I wouldn't meet otherwise. And then three, meet other editors, other writers, other artists, and it always usually led me to have more work. Every major convention I went to, I would say probably up to about 5 years ago, I'd always get work. Someone would always say, hey, you want to do something, right? I think one of the last times was I ended up doing the Justice League International comic for DC, because I saw Marie Javins.
And she was the publisher at the time, right?
She was the head editor.
Or editor-in-chief. Yeah, something like that.
That doesn't really happen now, because the editors are not sent to the conventions like they were. So my reasons for going are different now than they were even 5 years ago, because I know I'm not really probably going to go to the convention and pick up work.
Right.
I do better selling my artwork at home than I do lugging my artwork and having it get dog-eared and then worried about having to watch it.
Right.
The show.
And that's the plus side of all that tech you've been talking about. Or, sure, it's got its downside, but the idea that, your Etsy store or your merch store is still kicking while you're, all the stuff you can do while you're at home is amazing.
Yeah. So mostly for me at this point, it's about signing and drawing sketches. And if I'm going to make money, I probably work harder at a convention than I actually do at home, if that's possible, under combat conditions, because you're drawing something and then somebody's breaking your concentration.
Sure.
And then somebody's going by and hey, and then you have a conversation and then it's like, oh,
right.
What was I drawing? Oh, I was drawing MODOK,
Yeah.
And so it's different for me, but again, it's different for me at this stage in my career than it would be for somebody who was just starting off their career. But I still think that you have to plan for it. Like, I know a lot of people just plan to break even. If I go, I show my face, as they say. I see people, I meet people, I have a good time, I meet friends, make friends, right?
Right.
I break even, good. If I make a little cash in the pocket, better. If I'm losing a couple $100, well, I wouldn't want to lose $200 this week and $200 next week and then $500 the week after that. That would not be wise.
Yeah, you want to make table. A lot of people would say. I remember being at some free conventions where they give you a free table, and you're like, it's really slow all weekend. You're like, hey, I made table. I made no money. So yeah, I totally get that. It's interesting how many people who go there and lose money or expect to lose money. That's a fascinating part of Artist Alley, because it's such a. I haven't set up an Artist Alley in quite a long time, but it is such a scrappier place than in the main section of the hall. It's just, but it's such a wonderful place. It's such a creative place. There's so many people doing so many different things nowadays because of print on demand and all the other ways you can, I don't know, everyone's got a laser cutter or a wood burning kit, or a 3D printer. Artist Alley is amazing.
Yeah, you can get like all your stickers and your posters and your postcards get printed like in a day.
Yeah.
It's technology in the last 5 years has really made it so that you can decide next month I want to do a convention, and if you put your stuff in by Monday, by Friday you'll have your books or your whatever it is that your merch that you're making. So I think the thing you touched on in the beginning too was really important. So how many people would you say are on your mailing list?
1,150.
Wow. So those are 1,150 people that you could say, hey, give me, here's my new thing, give me $3.
And the number doesn't matter, the quality matters. I know people who are starting out, I have a list of 13,000 people. What's your open rate? You know what I mean? How many people are opening your emails and clicking on them? And if someone doesn't open my email after a year, I delete them from it. If they're not reading my emails, I don't want to send them. A lot of mailing list services, MailChimp, MailerLite, Constant Contact, they have thresholds. If your mailing list goes above a certain number, they start charging you. There are free lists. For the most part, if you keep it under 1,000 addresses, it's a free service. So I totally recommend people signing up for one of those, and also downloading your list from time to time. So if for some reason that list service goes away, you have a backup of those names. So
what would you say you estimate the percentage of people in Artist Alley are actually making a mailing list?
Making
mailing lists?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't looked for that. That's a really good question. I don't know. I've been beating that drum for so many years. I think since like the comic book diner. And before that, like when I was doing a lot of work with SPX, but that list is amazing. I had a list of people who signed up to receive my Astounding Space Thrills comic, and it was great because it was a mailing list. I mailed it out every day. The emailing was different back in the dawn of the internet. It wasn't like you would be flagged for spam automatically. So I had this list of, I don't know, 2,000 people I would email my comic strip to every day. It was almost like a blind CC. I think I had something on the server that did it. But there's a service now where you can send a list of emails, and they'll prune the ones they know happen to be junk. Like it's going to a Juno address or something like that, some extinct system. It would just automatically strip it, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. And so I used it when I did my Astounding Space Thrills Kickstarter a few years ago. I emailed those people, minus that pruning system. They cleaned up the list for me, and I'm sure I got more people. But at the end of every one of my Kickstarters, one of the exit questions is, do you want to be signed up for my mailing list? And the people who support you on Kickstarter, on Patreon, they're amazing because they've invested in you,
Right.
So again, having that mailing list, sometimes you can see it's a little kid who comes up and they just want to hold a pen and write their name. It's adorable. If it's a young person, I tend to put a little star next to it and don't add them to my list. Like they just want to hold a feather quill and write their name,
Right. Okay.
But again, to me, the number of people on the list doesn't matter. The quality of people if you have 50 people on your list and they want to hear from you, that's gold. That is the greatest thing. Because forget social media, that list. But there's a question. Jamar was making sure we didn't skip this. I know we touched on it briefly, but let's hit it. When you're doing recon at a show, how should you approach a convention, Mike? You're either a person who wants to set up at a show as, let's say as an independent creator, not necessarily someone who's trying to. We're going to say right now that for the most part, if you want to get a gig with the big publishers, a convention may not be the way to do it. Not the way it used to be. So you're going to go there you're looking to approach a show as maybe to meet other creators or to set up as an exhibitor for the first time. You want to be an artist alley. What do you look at? What do you look for at a convention?
Well, I would say that what kind of convention is it? Right? Can you get any information on it? I mean, if it's a local convention, it's easy. I mean, if you got to travel out of state, it becomes complicated, right? So I would think that you would try to talk to people that had been to that show. And usually, I know from talking to Liang, she's doing anime conventions and comic conventions. And she has friends, including some roommates, that also do both. And they would say, oh, I did this show in Boston, do that show. Or I did this show in Ohio, don't do that show.
That's
so
great.
I think you try to that's the advantage of social media and networking with people.
Yeah.
So that you can say, okay, I went to the show in Ohio. It was on a bad weekend. Who knows? People didn't have any money. Maybe I wouldn't go back.
Right.
The big shows are going to pull the most people. The big shows will be harder to get in. Right. There will be more people trying to get in now. So it's very obvious that you'll get probably waitlisted on some of them, at least your first year or two.
Right.
Also, like SPX is different, and Mocha is different than going to a Reed Pop show,
right.
Because it's more about like the whatever the smaller, more independent-minded, homespun creators, or at least it used to be. I mean, a lot of these lines or walls now are starting to sort of dissolve between categories. Like I would say in like 2005, you had mainstream conventions with the big mainstream publishers. Not that many small publishers would go to that.
Right.
Some, depending upon if they were local and
Sure.
they could go to it. Then you had the Mocha show or the SPX show where, Chris Spitzer would show up and, a lot of people like that, Fantagraphics, right? That was a different whole groove and vibe than when I did those shows than doing something like the old Fred Greenberg shows in New York. So where are you trying to fit in? What are you trying to do?
Right. For folks who don't know, what Mike's saying was there were the Read shows. There's Read Pop and there's Fan Expo. Those are and basically in ComicCon.com International, and those are the kind of the three main convention organizers. ComicCon.com, Comic-Con International only does a couple of shows, but they're just giants. Read Pop and Fan Expo seem to have all these territories and all these. If you see a Fan Expo show, like I think MegaCon is one now, and Chicago Comic-Con is one, but there's also C2E2,
right?
That's a Read Pop show, I think. So those are the big corporate ones where the decisions are really made at such a higher corporate level. It's kind of hard as a little creator, as a smaller creator, to make any headway. Then you have the regional shows. Call them regional, even though they have maybe as big an impact as some of these Chicago shows. They're owned locally. They're kind of independently operated, like, again, Baltimore Heroes, SC Comic-Con. There's a bunch of ones down here. Tidewater. There's a chain. That's kind of a smaller group of ones. Like, isn't there one Terrificon?
Yes.
And there's ones on the West Coast. But there's those, and then SPX and Mocha. Those are really, they grew out of the independent comics movement, the black and white comics, and so that spirit's still there. You don't have a print wall there. You have to be a comic book creator to set up at SPX. They have a wait list. Not only do they have a wait list, they have a lottery to get in. So I think about half their tables are allocated to the sort of mainstays of the convention. People have set up year after year: Fantagraphics, CBLDF, Ad House Books. I think Ad House is out. I think they've stopped operations, but people like that, Rob Ullman, Carl the Speed McNeil, they all have, like, they're in there. And then the other half is lottery, pure random chance if you get in or not. And it's just the nature of it. They've maxed out their capacity. And a lot of these conventions are also holding the size. They would love to expand, but part of it is, if you expand to the point where your show is so big that each individual creator makes less money, why are you doing it? Because you want people who are set up there to make money. And if you've got more tables than attendees, that will never happen. So,
well, again, since I would say since 2000, the explosion just in general of fandom, people wanting to do this, people wanting to hang out their shingle, has just been, astronomical. And then the other thing is, I know, like with SPX, if you move to a bigger place, can you get a bigger place at the time that you usually hold your convention?
Right.
Because there's only some places that are tapped out. They're tapped out. You can't get a bigger convention hall.
Yeah.
Right. And most of these places contract several years. I know Wizard was like contracted for several years. A lot of places go like, well, I'm going to book this year and next year. And then next year you book the year, they're booking like a couple years out to hold the spot. Yeah, I would use the internet to retcon and talk to people who are doing what you like to do. Very similar things to find out, like, oh, hey, I was thinking about doing the show. How did it do for you? Now, it may do great for you and shitty for somebody else, or it may do great for them and shitty for you. I've been hearing a lot of convention reports from my friends. And, one show you'll do great, the next show, crickets. And, sometimes you don't really know why that is. Maybe it's a bad weekend. Maybe there was a graduation, or like, what was it, last weekend or weekend before? There was Heroes, but there was also Terrificon at the same time, both on the East Coast. So one is pulling from the other.
Yeah,
they're too close together.
certainly for retailers, certainly for like the exhibitors. We have a comment here on YouTube from a Jamar on the YouTube, who has a rough take. At some point in your career, you're going to have to travel to shows. It's a cost of doing business. I don't think anyone could argue with that. And again, Jamar on YouTube, welcome to the show. You can't do one thing a year every year just because it's coming to your city. I totally get that too. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people do that. What Jeff Smith seemed to do with a lot of these conventions is he wouldn't do them back to back. He'd be like, okay, I'll do, I don't know, let's say Baltimore or Crossroads Columbus, and then he'd skip a year, and then he'd do it a year later, kind of giving the audience a chance to build up again. Like, if you're there every year and you don't have new material, that's one of the biggest things as a person who creates comics. If you don't have a new thing when you go to a comic convention, you're missing out, because your diehard fans will have bought your latest thing. They have everything on your table. If you go to a convention and you don't have something new, they'll come by and say hi. Well, that's nice, but you're missing out on a chance to do better at that show.
If you've been in comics 20 years, it's a nostalgia tour.
It's a nostalgia tour?
Yep. If you've been drawing, 20 years is sort of the mark where people who consume something as a kid or a young person become nostalgic. I think 20 years is sort of the mark. So I would say a lot of you guys are nostalgic for stuff that came out in the 80s, wrestling from the 80s. I see that happening all the time. And so there's a lot of artists who are not necessarily producing any new material. So it's the nostalgia tour. You're meeting fans, getting things signed, getting sketches. Again, if that works for you, right, that's one particular track, Are you trying to know, you sort of have to know your audience. Like, who are you aiming for? Is your goal to promote yourself just for yourself? Is your goal to try to meet people and promote your stuff to get more work?
Right.
But not necessarily, your own work, but working for somebody else.
When I go to the conventions, I have some clear goals. I go there, I want to sell books. I want to sell out of books. I want to. I need to make money at these conventions, or I can't, or they don't make sense for me at all. I mean, I love seeing people. I love the family aspect of it, but for me to travel and to not just the inconvenience of travel, but the inconvenience of everyone in my life for me traveling. Like pilling my sick cat. Basically having to handle all the things that I can't do at home. You're putting people out, so you have to justify it in some way. And if it's time you could be spending drawing, which is really what it is. I mean, again, it's like, I should be drawing always. And if it's taking you away from doing that, it feels like I have to justify it. And the only way to do that is, okay, it's going to pay some bills. It's going to take care of my next veterinary appointment.
Right. I mean, I know. No, the last time I did San Diego a couple years ago, I just flew and I did it as a tourist, which was the first time I had done that in like 15 years. Right. Because when I was doing it before, I think the first year or two, I just went as a tourist. And then after that, I was going and promoting my own stuff. I had a booth. Just the cost of the plane ticket, the cost of the hotel, the cost of boarding my dogs, the cost of shipping my material from here to San Diego was extremely expensive. And what I did there for a few years is I shipped him to Brett Blevin's house, and he lives in Arizona.
Right.
And then we would drive from Arizona over to San Diego, right? And that was probably the most expensive show to do because you're going from one side of the country to the other side of the country, right?
Sure.
I had to try to make money, or I would be losing literally thousands of dollars.
Absolutely.
To do a show like that. I did lose about $900 on a Great Eastern show that went bust, and he didn't tell anybody that it was bust. And so you show up and then you find out that it's bust.
I've done some shows where no one's there. Like it was a bunch of cartoonists. It was when the Spirits of Independence tour. This is 30 years ago almost, and it was Austin, I think, or Phoenix, Arizona. That's what it was, and it was just this in a I guess a community center, and that Paul Pope was there, and Bat and Lash, and maybe Bissett, and maybe Veach, and we're just in this the row tables in the gymnasium, and nobody shows up. At some point, there was bingo happening in the adjacent hall, and at some point, I remember two nuns walked in, kind of got a lay of the land in the room, and then didn't turn around, backed out slowly, Homer style, like, oh no, we don't belong in this room.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they drew their swords and it was a
First of the flames.
Yeah. So again, it depends upon what you're doing, and if you're going as a fan artist to sell fan art to fans, it's different than if you're going as a independent artist selling your own IP to fans. And so I think each thing requires you to plan. Also, some places have great amenities. Some convention organizers are great hosts. One of the things I always loved about Baltimore is it felt like you were, going to somebody's house, a very big house full of thousands of strangers.
Sure.
But they send somebody around to check on you. Do you need something? They'd give you a meal, which is great, right? Right? Some places you go, there's no, like, one of the big downsides of the New York show for me was that the food is terrible, super expensive, hard to get because there's a bazillion people there.
Sure.
Nothing nearby except the McDonald's.
All right. So that's a perfect segue to some of the practical things we could do at comic conventions to prepare for stuff like that. It's a note that we have a note from Notorious JRD. He says on the YouTubes, pack beef or vegan jerky, trail mix, refillable water bottle. Don't rely on overpriced concessions. I totally agree with that. A lot of convention centers won't let you bring in outside food, but they do let you wheel in boxes of your books. So if I don't know, a Sam's Club size box of trail mix or granola bars finds their way into your box, that's probably a good idea.
Well, it can be very stressful if you're a type 2 diabetic. You've got to keep your blood sugar in check, blood sugar up. I would say that there really are no healthy choices at most of the food facilities. So you really do yourself a great service by at least packing enough snacks or enough food that if you can't get up and go, or what they have is terrible, you're not going to perish. It helps if you have a table mate or two, split something, then when you need to do something, they can cover you, and vice versa. I know the last several years having Liang and Mimi help me was a great boon for me because, sometimes you get busy. Somebody wants to buy something. Somebody wants to you're signing or you're talking to somebody. And you're like, oh man, I'm starting to flag. I really could use a cup of coffee. All that goes to your quality of enjoyment, and you know, you want to be nice to people, happy, up. You know, people are going to come and visit you. You don't want to be like,
Yeah, that's a big deal too. There's kind of a sweet spot to working the table where you want to be friendly and you also don't want to be too aggressive, because if it can feel like, if you're walking through Artist Alley, it can feel like you're going through this kind of medieval marketplace, and
bring out your dad.
yeah, or buy everything is buy sell me stuff. So I think when you're behind your table, you have to be active, make eye contact, communicate with people. I like having postcards. They're cheap to make and you can hand them to people. So even if they're going to walk away from the table and they're not going to buy anything, at least maybe they take your postcard with them. Like Mike said, people leave there with bags full of junk. I would count postcards as partly that, but it might be a thing where they go home and check out your work later on. If someone's not going to buy something from your table and not going to sign up for your mailing list, at least they walk away with a postcard, some kind of lingering connection.
1%. I mean, that was the direct mail, right? Everybody gets junk mail every day, right? Zillions, probably most of the mail being shipped is some junk mail. They only need 1 or 2% of people who receive that junk mail to reply. And we're the same way, right?
Yeah.
You hand it out, you know,
where's my
postcards. You hand out 100 postcards. If you got 1% at every show over the course of 10 years, you've added a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And this is my postcard. It has a little bit of artwork on it. It says my URL at the bottom, and it's got the first page of my comic on the back. So it's my way of getting people to start reading the comic immediately. So I find this to be super helpful, and something like that with the little URL at the bottom and all that stuff. You could do a QR code. If you're looking for a free place to get a QR code, Adobe provides one with their free service, so you can get one from Adobe.
See, you know so much. You're like a TED Talk, a constant TED Talk.
You're saying the word nerd wrong. It's not TED, it's nerd.
I mean, again, this is all stuff that did not exist when I started, right? And even up until, I would say, more than half of my career as a convention goer, as a professional, none of that stuff existed, right? So it was almost impossible for you to build anything like a mailing list, right?
Right.
You know, it used to be that certain artists, I think it was like John Byrne, supposedly always had 5,000 loyal, followers. I remember there used to be a quote of something like that for EC fans. There was like a certain amount of EC fans would buy anything that came on with EC Comics, right? Now there's so much stuff. Who are your fans? And when they meet you, you want to give a good impression. You want to be nice, friendly. We haven't even gotten to the whole drawing while juggling chainsaws part of the convention.
Well, we do have a note here from, again, Jamar from YouTube. From Pencil to Pencil, our on assignment co-host. If you aren't good with people, consider if you need to be doing comic conventions. Your brand is on the line with every interaction. That is some real talk.
You're supposed to be undercover.
And then follow-up was, I love this too. If you're uncomfortable with talking with people or handling money, get someone to help you. That's key. If you can't do that, because also if you are going to be doing all this drawing, like what Mike was saying, with these kind of this kind of hostile environment, having someone who can just say, he'll be right with you, they'll be right with you, is super key. So you're not neglecting anybody.
Yeah, and you also have to deal with the fact that going to a convention, you meet sometimes very eccentric people who a lot of fans are awkward and shy and don't have great social skills themselves. And so I find that, or they might be nervous in meeting you. So I find that if you are warm and gracious, you sort of put that person at ease. Rarely have I ever had a bad interaction. Some people don't have the little man inside that goes, it's time to disengage from this conversation. Move on.
I recommend, again, if you get to know your neighbors at the comic convention, occasionally you can call in for a little help. You can have wing people who maybe help extricate you from certain situations, because there are also the people who are super sweet, but they won't leave and they will block your table from other people getting there. And that's a difficult thing to do. It's very delicate. You don't want to shoo somebody away, but at the same time, you also want to be able to handle everyone who's coming to see you. JRD has a question. Following up on the postcard, maybe doing a brochure. I'm wondering if that's a good idea. Is that too much?
That might be too much. I think, usually people go through and like, is this free?
Right.
Is that free? Is that page?
Sure.
That's free, right? That's free, right? Have something, like you said, that people can take for free. They go back later on. Promote your appearance at the convention through your social media. Let people know that you're going to be at a show. You can't always go by and rely upon the blurb that the convention, the person who puts on the convention, uses. So because you want to have a good experience. You want the people who meet you to have a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have learned from going to shows is I've pared down over the years. I've pared down what I take, what I try to sell. As the shows have grown bigger, it's sort of like a pachinko machine. There's a lot more places for that money to fall before it gets to you. So I used to go and take like every copy of Draw Magazine, every copy of my self-published stuff, every copy of the magazine, sketchbooks. That's a lot of stuff to be logging in and out. And then I would look at the end of the show and I would ascertain, okay, it's not worth taking this stuff because most of the people by now have that stuff. So like you're saying, if you have new stuff, great. Maybe pare down taking your old stuff. But
Yeah,
I've also decided that I'm not going to be producing art to sell as prints, because I don't think the people who buy my work want to buy a print.
That's a fair point.
I have made a couple prints and I have taken them over. This pre-COVID. But I found out that it really wasn't worth my time to do the prints, because the people coming up, well, they don't want to print, they want to get a sketch. Right. So do a little bit of homework and be willing to adjust your mix. Again, doing this 40 years, I'm not going to have the same kind of response at some of these shows that somebody who was younger. My goals are different. What are your goals? My goal, if I go to Baltimore, hopefully is to make some money. And some shows I did very well. I know that I would not be trying to do San Diego at this point. Probably would not be trying to do New York City at this point, simply because the expense is so great. The amount of money that I would have to make to do that show just seems unlikely to me,
Yeah,
like,
I'm the same.
a guy like Alex Ross has thousands of images, thousands and thousands of covers that he's done, hundreds at least. And so what do you see at his booth? You see all kinds of serigraphs and that's what he's not really selling his original art, probably. He's selling his images. If you're an image seller, that's a different thing than if you're and you're selling images of the most popular characters. Right? If you were selling just images of, I don't know, free copyright characters, free public domain stuff, probably wouldn't really work out as much. So you got to do a little homework. You got to be a little bit honest about, really think about what you're doing and be willing to tailor, and then look at the expense. It might be worth going to New York to go around and meet people as a professional. It may not be worth going to New York and going around having a table, which would cost you thousands of dollars.
Yeah. The hotels alone will be costing you more than everything else you're doing there. We got a comment here on YouTube from Michael. It's a really good one. It's talking about table etiquette. Michael says, I'm late to the game, but I would say to keep negative opinions about the industry or other creatives on the down low. It doesn't make a good impression of you as a fan customer, if a fan customer overhears this. I couldn't agree more. Occasionally we'll hear some people smack talking some folks. Rarely.
We know what artists like to do. Artists bitch. Right? And if you have a room full of thousands of artists, there's some serious bitching going on that weekend.
Oh, as getting to JRD's question about the brochure, I kind of like the idea that it's different, but I would look at whatever the price of that is and see if there's something else you can make for that amount of money. So it seems to be, my question would be like, whatever that costs you per unit for a brochure, if you can give something away that is content, I feel you're better off doing that. If you can, this postcard is not a postcard. It's the first page of my comic. It's a postcard, but I send it to people and say, if you like that, there's 295 more pages.
Right.
It's getting them started. I feel like that is worth it. If there's a sample page, this is something I picked up from Tom Zoller. He had his book, America's Tom Zoller. He had his book, and he knew which page to open, which double page spread to open up in Love and Capes, I think it was. He would just open up the book and hand it to someone and says, check out these first 2 pages. If you like those 2 pages, then you'll like my book.
Yeah.
That's also has something like the aspect of putting it in their hands. There's a lot going on there, but just getting them to read your stuff when they've never read it before, what better way for them to find out if they like you?
Yeah. Now, I've been through Artist Alley, and I've been in Artist Alley where the people are sitting behind their table and they're very sort of dour, and you can feel like they're just sucking the energy out, and you really, it's sort of the opposite environment for most artists, because most artists are, I'm in my studio all day by myself, except for my cat, right? And then suddenly you go into a room full of thousands of people, hundreds of people, and then you have to suddenly go from being an introvert to being an extrovert, right? And can you talk about your book? If somebody asks you, oh, what's your comic about? And you're like, there's so much going on, they're going to disengage and move on. What is your work? Do you know what your work is about? Can you talk about your work? Can you talk about your process? Do you have something to say, hey, here, check it out? You have to be personable and engaging. And that doesn't mean you got to be like a used car salesman, but a lot of artists are not like that. They just sort of sit behind their spread, and they're just, and if you're drawing, right, you're kind of like, huh. We look up every once in a while, and then suddenly there's like something here in your peripheral vision, and you look up and there's somebody looking at your stuff. Do you say, hey, do you talk to them, or are you just like,
So what do you, okay, so let's talk about spiels, Mike. What's your spiel? Someone comes up to your table and they've never heard of you. They see your banner behind. What's your banner? Everyone's got a banner now.
Who are you talking to, Steve Conley, that someone wouldn't know the magnificent Mike Manley?
They're they've recently woken from a 50-year coma, Mike. They just remember that they love the funnies. They love the yellow kid and their little Nemo, and
well,
they
so
still.
what is this robot? I don't understand.
So what is your banner? What does it say? Does it say? It says Mike Manley in big lettering.
Mike Manley, and then I had one banner that had I had a table banner that had the spread from the Justice League. Then I had a banner that had Phantom, Darkhawk, and Batman on it, because those are the things that most people know me from. So if I do another show this year, I'll probably have to get another table banner. So most people who are coming, again, that's where I'm saying my position is different, because I'm not getting random people just showing up. I'm getting people who, oh, I know that character, or I know that guy, and oh, I want him to sign my books, or I want to get a sketch. I mean, I don't think anyone is showing up just randomly, because especially in Baltimore, people know me.
Right.
And the demographic of that convention is right in the wheelhouse of people who have always bought my work, so they know me.
Sure,
right.
Sure.
When I went to Wizard, one of the reasons why I stopped doing that show is that the people coming in were not comic book readers. They were in general entertainment. So they would walk past and they're like, oh, what's that? You know, not like they were negative or anything. They were just like, oh, you know, and they would just walk. They never read anything I ever did. They're not ever going to read anything that I did, you know. So again, sort of know your audience, know the audience of the show. Don't go to to me, I would never go to a big show that had lots of stars and autographs and that kind of thing, because I know I'm not going to do well at a show like
that. Right. Yeah. My banner is, and has been for the last few years, just this picture from the Middle Age. It's just that group shot. It's a nice, bright, colorful image. It says the Middle Age. It's not really promoting me as much as the property, my product. For folks who might know my older work, I did a comic called Astounding Space Thrills and a comic called Bloop. I used to bring those things, and I've done licensed stuff for IDW, like Star Trek, and covers for Adventure Time and Turtles. I used to bring that stuff, but to me, that gave my table a very disjointed appearance. This might be, Comic-Con 102 stuff, but to me, having a clear message on your table is really important, because if people are zipping by and they don't know who you are, and I presume they don't know who I am, having a single sense of what you do, that you're not a retailer, you're not just selling bags and all assorted merch, but you're actually a cartoonist who does this one thing. And having that, when it was a disjointed thing where it was the sci-fi stuff here and then the fantasy stuff here and the kids stuff there, it was like, you must be a small publisher. You can't have, that's not one person. That's got to be a team or something like that. So I've boiled it all down. Now it's all just the Middle Age, and it's much more effective.
Yeah. I mean, I would see guys like Neil Adams. He would have like a giant row, and he'd have all these, prints, all these images. But again, somebody who's probably a fan of Neil Adams is my age, right? They're older, older person. They're not a 20-year-old, right? And so he's trying to do volume. He's trying to generate volume based upon, like Alex Ross, based upon all the images that he's generated over the years, because he's not really drawing sketches for people at shows. Some artists don't really do that. So the way they make their money is by charging for the autograph, which I don't, right? That's another thing. And that was a real big thing starting a couple of years ago, of charging for autographs. And the only time I would charge would be if somebody had, like a ton of books. Now, there was a couple retailers that would used to do things like they'd send their little girl over. Will you sign me? right? And so you're not going to be mean to a little kid, so you sign. And then they come back again, will you sign these? Right? And I would say, I'm happy to sign anybody's comics. I'm not going to charge anybody money to sign anybody's comic. I don't do CGC. I don't believe in that. I'm sorry. Other people do. But it's like, I don't believe you need to have a certificate of authenticity that says, I am me. Right? I'll be happy to draw anything for you or sign anything for you. I don't. Because I saw this happen before where people pay that extra money. But to me, it doesn't make the work any more legitimate. And America's Tom Zoller, or we should say Soviet Union Tom Zoller, is mean to everyone. I would say, yeah, I'm fine with signing anything for anyone for free. If you bought my comic, the least I can do is sign your book.
I know a lot of people share that. There's so I'm thinking about the go bag, what you bring to the comic conventions. I have this kind of large bin that I have almost all my stuff, and it's got table standees that fold flat. It's got tablecloths, multiple tablecloths, because you often want to have a bonus one, an extra one that you can throw over the table at the end of the day to cover your stuff. It's not much by way of security, but it does keep, people would have to look to see what's under that particular table. It's a pretty good form of
see, I always take my art. Books. You can steal my books, but you're not stealing my art.
Yeah, agreed. Anything like that, anything precious or anything that was too easy to take, I would not leave there. But and they also have a kit of just supplies. It's got, it's not stuff I would. Certain things you can't have as in your carry-on, but I have like scissors, tape. I have like sandwich clips that you would use in the supermarket. Those little clips are awesome for, you don't know what you're going to hold something onto. Little butterfly clips, the little.
Yeah. Yep.
These hold my tablecloth on. Those little eyeglass wipes. I mean, there's a ton of stuff you might not
need.
Wipes.
Hand sanitizer.
Then there's stuff that you might not need, but at some point your neighbor's going to say, do you happen to have packing tape?
And duct tape will save you in a way that regular packing tape won't. When something starts to, and you put the packing tape on it, it'll eventually it'll pull off. So I always advise having, and also big C clamps. Those big C clamps are good to have. Have a couple of those things. Yeah.
And Jamar's mentioning the square. That is indispensable nowadays. That's sort of like the banner, the booth banner. Most of my sales at a convention are card now. Most people want to use their contactless payment, whether it's Apple Pay or a chip card or some kind. So if you get the square reader that has the chip insert or the tappable, that is a must-have. It cost $50 back in the. I don't know what it costs nowadays, but you will wish you had it.
It's definitely worth it if you're doing. Again, are you doing one show? Are you going to do 3 shows? Are you going to do 10 shows? How many shows are you doing? I think that is something you have to think about from the very beginning. Like I'm not going to do 10 shows a year. I probably would never do 10 shows a year because it's just too much for me with producing my work. So I really just try to pick shows that I can go to pretty easily, which was for years. It was just like Baltimore. So again, like probably wouldn't do the New York show. And if I did San Diego again, I certainly would only do it as a civilian. So, plan it out. That there's it used to be a website that actually gave the dates of all the conventions throughout the year.
Sure.
And sort of plan it out, and plan backwards. That's the other thing. If your show is in April and you have to have, and you want your new book to be ready, plan backwards, and then add 2 weeks.
Breathing room, absolutely.
Add 2 weeks for something happening, right? I know so many people who are just like sweating bullets.
Yeah.
Right down to the end of, oh, now I have to I have to ship it to the hotel.
Right. Or,
I got to ship it I can't ship it to my house and take what I want. Now I got to ship it to the hotel.
And then your hotel has receiving fees and all sorts of stuff. One of the things you can do is, as you get more experience doing this, you can start knowing, well, I know this retailer who's connected to that convention, or I know another person who's setting up there and they're driving in. If you know that you can UPS them a box versus trying to check that bag at the airport, which might cost you $50, you can mail it for 20, something like that. So many of these things are through experience. I would, if you haven't done a comic convention before, I'd say start locally. Start with a nearby show. Now they're not going to make you as much money. It's basically commensurate with the size of the event. I do some here in Florida, and it's kind of like a yard sale. It's got a few cartoonists, Alex Saviak, maybe somebody like that, local cartoonists, Terry Beatty. I know John Beatty, excuse me. It's fine. They're not gangbusters, but it's a good experience and it costs you nothing. And it's usually a Sunday, a single day show. So something like that. I would start with local shows and then work your way up to something bigger. But having a little bit of experience at a local show is super helpful.
And some people only do you'll see some people do Saturday only, right? Some people don't even show up on Friday because Friday is usually the slowest day. And then after about 2:00 on a Sunday, attendance drops at most shows, except the most ginormous shows. My policy was if people want to sketch, they have to pay me. Because if I'm going to sit there and draw it, I'm not going to draw it and then they're going to come back, oh, sorry, right? So I'll do your sketch, but you're going to pay me now for the sketch. If I'm going to,
I think that's more common. I'm one of the last holdouts for the other way, for like, pay me if you like it. But I feel confident that if someone doesn't like it, they don't want it. First of all, no one's ever said, no, I don't like it. So I'm kind of going on that track record, but I feel like it's easier for me to remember if it's always I would say one way or the other. So you're not mixing and matching. Either always take the money up front or always pay when you deliver it, so that it's consistent. You don't have to keep track of which one's which. Tom is also on the team money up front.
Yeah, because if you draw a sketch, that's custom. You could have drawn another custom sketch. If that person doesn't come back, well, then that's on them. I'm pretty easy to find. So if
you guys have convinced me, anyone who comes up to me in Baltimore, you guys have Mike, Tom, and Jamar to blame.
Yeah. And that way, if they don't come back, they can contact you and say, hey, this is me. I'm sorry I couldn't come back, whatever. Because I've had that in the past where somebody would do a sketch. I would do a sketch and they'd be like, oh, I ran out of money.
Did you tear it up in front of them?
Right.
We have a couple more points I wanted to get to before. I know we're cutting it close. If you have questions or comments, suggestions for your fellow cartoonists that you'd like to share, put them in the chat and we'll try to get them before we go. But Jamar said, don't leave early. That's the kiss of death. This is something I absolutely believe. I'm so glad you said this, Jamar, because often, especially if you're a guest of the show, I feel a complete obligation to be there when the show opens and stay there till it closes, because I feel like I'm there on their dime. If they've paid for my table or if they've paid me gas money to come to the show, then I'm there for you. And then also on the way out, this is something we talked about in chat, is that make a point of thanking the convention organizers.
Yes.
Maybe not the Monday after the show, since they're probably getting nutrition via IV drip. But a couple of days later, send them a nice note and thank the volunteers. And thank the volunteers all weekend long.
You see them going past, say, hey, thanks, be just, it's just like old fashioned, just be gracious, be a nice person. Don't be demanding ass, sometimes things happen, sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes they don't have the red M&Ms in your room. Don't throw a shit fit. Be a gracious person, because that will travel. That will travel. If you're an asshole, everyone will know it.
Right.
Everyone will know it, because we were talking about earlier, people gossiping at a convention or whatever. Yeah, if you're an ass, it will come back to you, because then they won't want to hire you back and then have you come back. But then they might also tell their friend who's running another show, hell yeah, I had so-and-so over here this weekend and he was a jerk.
Yeah. And it's a thing where if you thank the organizers and the people who helped put the convention on, next year when they're wondering, which table should I give that? So there's a really nice spots opened up. Should I give it to the person I've never heard from or the person who thanked me profusely? You don't have to do it. I'm sort of just trying to make, there's a reason to do it that's nice and because you're a nice person. But if you need to be
fake nice,
well, or if you need to get something out of it, then that's a way to do it. Well, like a couple more notes here I want to get to. Jamar, again, I wish you were here, man. Make friends with your aisle mates. Easy way to network. Absolutely. They have your back when you have to run to the restroom. They're going to keep it on your table for you. If you have a panel, I want a quick aside here for Heroes Con. I did a panel. I never do panels. I rarely do panels. Never did one at Heroes Con before, but David Peterson, regular visitor here and creator of the Great Mouse Guard, or great creator of the Great Mouse Guard, did a panel called Audio Comics, or Comics Aloud is what it was called. And we read from our comics. It was a panel where we get up there and the artwork was put on the screen and we would just read it aloud and doing voices and all that stuff. It was a great panel. I hated to be away from my table for a little over an hour, but it was a wonderful experience. And then afterwards, people came from the panel to buy my book. So it is important when you do those panels, bring your postcards, bring an example of your book, something like that. But yeah, that was a great experience. So David, if you're there, thank you. But yeah, making friends with your aisle mates, super important. That's, I might know most of you guys that way. Enlightened self-interest. Tom was correcting my, how about just being nice? All right. Oh goodness. We have another side question for you related to your, maybe we talk about this before we close, Mike, the, mentorship program. Someone was asking a question here in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, the deadline is fast approaching, and I'm sort of soft closing. I think it's been a week. Well, actually, it was up a little bit before that. So I don't know what their question is about it, but
the question they have is, does Mike want the samples to be sent through WeTransfer or just some other method before sending you files? If folks don't know, as Mike is up, check out last week's episode, the first few minutes of it. We talk about Mike very graciously offering to help coach some aspiring cartoonists.
Well, everything is in the post that I put up. It's still on my Facebook. It tells you how to send everything, so you can send it to me. You can stuff it as a WeTransfer, and you can email it to Mike at Action Planet, and that's the way I want the stuff. Have the stuff sent. Again, really looking to see how people think. I want to see 6 pages of continuity, preferably penciled. One of the things about seeing many submissions is people didn't really read the application very well. So read it 2 or 3 times to make sure that you send me the files, and you send what I want to see, which will then help me determine whether I can help you. Right.
That's great. And that what's great is that advice actually also applies for when you're applying to be at a convention. All those conventions have specific application forms, and if you mess something up, if you make their life even a little bit more difficult, it just won't get through. It's going to be a thing where, oh, this person didn't include their phone number, I gotta track it down. Just take them off the list. So read these things carefully and fill them out exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this application is actually fairly simple compared to other things I've had to fill out in my life. But when you fill out any application to apply to any job, especially in comics or animation, anybody who's looking at that is looking at maybe potentially thousands if you're at a big company. So anytime you, like Steve says, you don't check a box, or you don't send it to file the right way, or you don't do something the way it should have, and now it's difficult to look at, you just make it hard for that other person to help you. What I'm looking to do is to mentor maybe 2 people to improve their storytelling and drawing, but mainly their storytelling and drawing in service of storytelling. I'm not really trying to coach people on inking yet, things like that. Drawing and storytelling, right? And if you're drawing for animation, or you're drawing for comics, and comics, again, to me is like such a great medium, because if you're really good at drawing comics, you're usually pretty good at drawing just about anything else. If you wanted to do background designs or character designs, you basically have to do all that when you're doing comics. So well, that's not a basic drawing thing. I'm not going to show you like how to take a circle and a cone. It's right. Not like that, right? So I'm not looking to teach people how to draw basic cartooning, right? I'm not looking to teach people all the basic fundamentals, right? I'm looking to mentor someone to help them make better choices, improve their work, but also, you know, you kind of have to be at a certain level, or it won't really pay off.
Yeah, this isn't a 101 class. This is a third year at least.
Yeah, I would say at least a third year. You know, I mean, I advise, when I would teach my high school drawing class, I would get kids who were all super wide spectrum of ability, right? And the chief thing I did was to help them, the ones who were very serious and wanted to continue, to chart the path to your goal, right? So I had one person apply, they want to go into animation. Well, you know, that's such a broad term, because what animation has many different parts. You've got 2D animation, and if you're working in 2D animation, there's all these different jobs in 2D animation. 3D animation, some of the same jobs, but then they're in 3D. You know, people say concept art, right? So a young person will say concept art, right? Because that's a term that they've read, and they've seen that, and they've seen other people say, I'm a concept artist. But you have to really start to examine what that is.
I think that might be I want to put that as a pin in that and make that its own episode. I think just breaking that down would be super useful. But I think it deserves its own time. But we got a couple more questions about convention setup, Mike. Is that want to jump back on those before we run out? All right. But I love that idea. I love the idea of exploring that, because I'm not familiar with that world, and I'd love to learn more. But we had a question here from Catalina on the YouTubes. Make sure I got our banner back here. I know what I'm kind of doing. Catalina asks, sorry if it's been asked before, but are you fans of putting the prices viewable to everybody, or just prices, um, saying them out loud? So do you mark the prices of things on the table, or are you, is there another method that you use? Like, do you leave it blank and say, okay, let's start the conversation, let's begin the haggling? Or
I usually say sketches start at X amount. I don't really. I used to have a little set of stickers when I would be selling art, that I would put a little sticker on the back of the art and write what the price was for the piece of artwork. The comics are obviously, cover our cover price.
oh, really? The cover price? They're not the convention markup?
Yeah. So and again, what somebody wants is a sliding scale, right? Like, some people come up and they want, like, all the Avengers fighting all the Justice League on a sketch cover,
Right.
but then they want somebody doing, they want these really specific things. It's like, that's not something I do at a convention.
I think America's Tom Zoller can jump in there. He set up a formula which I think is quite excellent, which is it's per character. So if here's the price,
Yes.
and so if someone wants 5 characters on there, they just take the number times 5, and it gets expensive, but it just takes so much more work. So I admire that. And we had another. There's a couple of general notes. If anyone else had any parting comments, JRD had this one, maybe at the beginning of our broadcast. Remember that pros often make their money through commissions and will be on their in their hotel room late in the AM drawing. Use this free time to meet other artists at your level and form new bonds connections. I feel like talking about going to the hotels, like some of these conventions have hotel cons, like Heroes Con famously. There's a hotel near the convention center where most of the artists and guests stay, and the bar is just lively conversation all the time. I think some people go down there to network. That used to be a more common thing at conventions when, again, like as Mike was saying, editors were there, but
Your editor would buy you a drink.
But it's a thing now where you just go down and you see someone with a just drawing. I've seen people in a circle and they all just have their pads out and they're all drawing.
Yeah, there was like some drink and draws that used to happen at those things.
Sure.
I mean, the idea, ideally, you should try, I guess, sort of my closing remark would be, you should try to do your homework so that you can tailor your experience at a convention so that it really works for you after you're at the convention, not just while you're at the convention.
Yeah.
After you're at the convention. That might be a little bit different, I suppose, if you're a fan artist selling fan art at a anime convention, because what you're doing is, you're going and selling, and then you're going home and you're making more to go and do it again, right? And maybe you're not, you're not getting an editor, or you're not, meeting it. Maybe you team up with another artist, but I would say if you're a creator of trying to work for other people, or you're trying to sell your own IP, not fan art, but your own IP, then try to set it up and make the experience so that you have something positive to walk away from. Even if you didn't make money, but you got contacts, or you made a friendship, or you found an inker, or you found a penciler, or you found a writer, or you found a colorist. That's why Jamar is 100% right, and I would always encourage my friends when they would go to go around and to talk to other people. A lot of artists are actually very shy, so being in a convention is already kind of a stressful thing, and then two shy people trying to talk to each other in the middle of a hurricane, you know, with all the stuff going on, does become difficult. So, you know, try to find what works for you, right? Because again, what works for me might work for Steve, or might not work for Steve, might work for Jamar. Try to find what works for you, what makes you feel comfortable, you know. And if there's something that you can take away that makes your next convention experience good, and also follow up if you're meeting other artists or other editors, other writers, other creators, follow up. Again, maybe not like Steve says, not the next day when everybody's like, all totally stressed out. But I would say within a week, follow up.
Absolutely.
Follow up with people. And if they're wanting something from you, the same way, same thing. Follow up with people. Don't say, oh, yeah, well, I finally got around to it, a couple weeks later. No, follow up. Be proactive.
Yeah. All right. And we're going to give Jamar the last word. So ending our episode as we should. Jamar says, my last thing. Don't overextend yourself for one thing or one show. Do what you can. It's a journey. I love that. And we will be here next week with Jamar back from his journey, I hope. Mike, where can people find you online?
The easiest place to find me is on Facebook, and Draw Manley on Instagram, and I'm also the Monster Man on Twitter. Although I don't Twitter. I'm Twittering a little bit more now than I was a little while ago. But of course, I always expect any day Twitter will just it'll be like the house at the end of Poltergeist, will just get just sucked down into a black hole. Never see it again.
I think it's going great. I think it's really going great. Folks can find me. Well, Mike, I really loved tonight's conversation. Thank you for being here. Thanks for thanks to everyone in chat. Love the comments. Super helpful. I left Heroes Con inspired, and
you still haven't taken it off.
No, I've never taken it off. Shower with it. Had a great time at Heroes Con. Had a wonderful chat this evening. We will see you all next week. If you want to read my webcomic, The Middle Age, you can find it at middleagecomic.com, on Webtoons, Tapas, and Go Comics. And for the magnificent maestro of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley, and myself, I think we still have to take care of some hygiene here.
Yes.
So let's wash those Kirby hands, everybody.
Slow. Can you turn it off while washing your Kirby hand?
I'm gonna try.
See you next week, everybody.